Okay, well, welcome everybody to our first ever podcast about parenting neurodiverse teens and young adults. I'm Dr. Ed Callahan, and I have been in the field for over 30 years working with parents and families in different situations and circumstances. And joining me today is Amy J., who is a parent. And so, what we thought we would do is just have some conversations about parenting a neurodivergent teen or young adult and talk about just some of the nuances of that. And I'll share my kind of professional point of view and experience. And Amy will chime in with the parent side of things. So you get the perspective from both myself and Amy as we talk about some of the nuances and challenges of parenting a neurodivergent teen or young adult, and as well as some of the fun or cool aspects of it as well. This doesn't all have to be doom and gloom. We know it is definitely challenging, but we want to try to provide some information that'll be helpful for you as you're listening to this podcast. So, anyways.
Well, that doesn't really dovetail into what I was going to say, because I was going to say it's just hard.
Yep. So again, got to remind you, this definitely is just hard. It's just hard. So I think probably one of the first things I want to start off is if you're a parent who's kind of new to this or starting to realize that maybe your child is on the autism spectrum or has ADHD or maybe nonverbal learning disorder or maybe some other learning disorders like dyslexia, dysgraphia, or dyspraxia, those kind of things. That's what the kind of the global term of neurodiversity encompasses. And so, just let me be clear about that. It's attention deficit disorder, autism spectrum disorder, nonverbal learning disorder, and then the other kind of learning disorders like dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, and so on. And that's kind of the general term of what neurodiversity is. So if you're new to this, that could be a lot of new information. And again, this is kind of a complex and in-depth issue. And so, I hope you'll have patience to start this process and learn as much as you can about it. And there's reasons why that's important. And if you're a parent that has experience in parenting and have done a lot of research and things like that, we hope that you'll find value in this as well. Just always looking for different ideas and, things to try and, new things to approach or new ways to think about definitely problems that you may be experiencing. And also, I think the important mindset is just trying to find ways to work with your teen or young adult's brain rather than work against it. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my big thing all the time, like trying to find strategies to work with their brain rather than against their brain. So,
well, and the challenge for parents is that you get so much conflicting information about how you should parent your child. And the neurotypical stuff does not work with a neurodiverse child. And you have family members and sometimes professionals and friends and everybody. And then you've got a lot of feelings wrapped up in that of guilt and, is it me? Am I a bad parent? What's going on? All that kind of stuff. So it makes it really challenging.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of my big messages I want to get out to everybody as I start trying to build my digital practice life here, is that really traditional parenting is a lot of times the exact opposite of what you should be doing with your neurodiverse child. And so it is really hard because everything, maybe all the parenting that you experienced yourself as a kid growing up, let alone all the parenting books and all the advice out there, is really contrary a lot of times, or it's counterintuitive, or really it's kind of the exact opposite of what you really need to be doing to be more effective with your neurodiverse teen. So that's right. I mean, again, Amy, certainly a lot of pressure socially to do things in certain situations that, may certainly be what people would expect you to do in those situations, but recognizing that, as you found out, a lot of times through trial and error, that if you do apply some of those traditional approaches, that it really just makes things harder and worse and can cause some harm actually.
Well, and actually I remember when my kids were younger, before we knew they were neurodiverse, as toddlers, they have all these systems out there, and I'm not going to say which one we tried, but we tried one of those. You get the videos and the CDs and you watch it, and it's going to make your life so much easier. Well, it made our life twice as hard, but we didn't know why, right? Until we really finally got a diagnosis and started talking to people. But even then, a lot of times we would get conflicting information from schools and other places. So we were always looking for other resources. And that's why I was so grateful when we found you, Dr. Callahan, because you really need somebody where you can say, this is, kind of the situation that's going on. And, you're so emotionally close to it. It's very hard to be objective about how you should move forward. And so it's really helpful to have a good understanding of what works and what doesn't work. And then also some kind of parent community to kind of talk to bounce these things off of.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's really missing is, again, there's Facebook groups and other groups out there of parents that are starting to kind of organize and talk about things, but it's hard to find a community of people that are in the same boat, really, that have the same issues, that are dealing with the same kind of challenges as each other. Because again, what you do is you get into another support group, and then you get all this traditional parenting advice that's saying, no, you got to hold more boundaries, or you got to be stronger with your consequences, or you need to take that phone away, or whatever it may be. And realizing that as you try that, a lot of times that just creates bigger problems and more conflict, and really contributes to your son or daughter feeling more like they just can't meet the expectations, and then their self-esteem starts to take a plunge, and they really don't have any other response other than to just melt down and either shut down completely, or get so dysregulated that they're possibly damaging property and things along those lines. So
well, and I think the other thing that makes such a big difference is the age that they are, because the scenarios and the struggles, you have a neurodiverse teen who doesn't want to learn to drive. How hard do you push it? Do you care? Do you not care? What makes the most sense? And there's lots of, I seem to find a lot of things out there for toddlers or even elementary school kids, but then it seems like there's this huge dead zone. Maybe it's because the teen years are so hard, the adolescent years are so hard to tackle, but there's a dead zone, or there's particularly a dead zone for information about neurodiverse adolescents and teens.
Yeah, and it's also the case a lot of times people don't recognize, or their child goes undiagnosed until they get into that end of middle school, or going right into high school, where adolescence sets in and the social relationships get more complicated, and things that used to be kind of cute and quirky are now becoming problematic, and you're starting to see that the social relationship pieces are starting to get more apparent. And so sometimes, parents won't know until the end of junior high and into high school. Then all of a sudden it's starting to become apparent that there's a problem. Then maybe they're lucky they get a diagnosis, or an appropriate diagnosis. Because man, we could go into that all day too, which we'll have to come back to in a future episode. But that idea of like being misdiagnosed is huge. A lot of times kids on the spectrum will get diagnosed as oppositional, like oppositional defiant disorder or something along those lines, which is a completely different situation than from a kid who is, either ADHD or on the autism spectrum, because the reasons for the opposition is very different. Coming from a child that's on the autism spectrum, it's more about emotional overwhelm and just being stimulously overloaded, and then having a hard time coping with everything, or like changes in routine or schedules. These kind of things can really dysregulate them, and so it looks like opposition. And in fact, sometimes to the untrained eye, so to speak, they look very much the same. Like this kid just doesn't want to do their homework, and they're going to throw a fit, and they're going to try to throw a tantrum to get out of responsibilities or something along those lines. But understanding the source of where that comes from makes all the difference in terms of how, one, you as a parent see it, because you're like, oh man, my son's really struggling right now. What can I do to try to help? Versus, man, my son's just being a, fill in the blank right now, being a jerk or whatever. And, I, feel like I want to, punish them or consequence them to get them to behave differently. But of course, if it is, coming from a point of neurodiversity, then that's going to be the wrong approach for sure. So,
well, and the whole thing is just so incredibly exhausting, right, for both parents. And it's even harder when, as parents, you're struggling to figure this out. And in our case, for one of our neurodiverse children, we had one diagnosis, but we didn't have both, and one came much later. And once we had that second one, it really made a difference. But my husband and I didn't even agree on what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And so, and then the other sibling is, having difficulties because there's so much tension in the house. I mean, it just can be so painful. And that's really, working with you has really helped us, because we've just had that opportunity to really understand what neurodiversity is, and then have a better understanding of what's going to work for our kids and what isn't. And then as we're implementing it, if something isn't quite going right, we have the parent forum to bounce it off of other people or off of you to say, this is what we tried. We thought this was going to work and then it didn't. Why isn't it working? And then we find out, oh, well, we weren't quite handling it. Maybe because you're so close to it, it's really
Yeah.
difficult to be objective.
Yeah, that's so hard to be the parent of your own child versus, again, that's where the parent community comes in. It's really helpful is because people can see things in other people's kids from an objective point of view that you just can't see yourself. And that's, again, that's
Yep.
where my kind of like, I see that a lot with just my professional point of view. I've seen a lot of different families under a lot of different circumstances. So it's easy for me to say, oh, hey, did you consider this? Because I've seen a lot of different these kind of scenarios. And sometimes it's just a little subtle thing that makes a lot of difference in the long run, but that's where the other parents in the community can definitely see things that maybe you wouldn't be able to. And plus, coming from a non-judgmental place as well, like, hey,
right.
we've been through the ringer too. And yeah, we've done some crazy stuff trying to manage our son or daughter. And so they
Well, and
understand where
what's
you're
so
coming
helpful
from.
about the
So
training, though, is that both parents have heard the same messaging, right? And I find your training a lot easier. I don't do well just sitting down reading a book. But, I find your training to be, quick to absorb and easy to understand. And a lot of times what will happen is I'll watch a video, my husband will watch a video, and then we'll both process it together. And every time, there's a lot of times where we realize, well, this was the way that I thought it should be done, and this is the way you thought it should be done, and neither of us were on the same page or really, frankly, on the right track.
right.
And so, through this process, what it's really helped my husband and I do is be on the same page, be kind of united in how we parent our children, which makes it better for them because you really then are doing kind of being consistent and holding the boundaries kind of things that you can do for neurotypical kids, but we're doing it together, and frankly the kids can't divide us, and because they do that.
They will. Yeah. Yep.
They're very smart that way. So, and it's helped our marriage because we're not at each other's throats all the time because there's just so much tension. And well, I told you not to do that because that was going to, dysregulate so and so. And now you've wrecked the day. And, there just is a lot of stuff that it really is disruptive to a family if you don't know how to parent your children, of course.
Yeah. No, and I think that is, there's so many good points in there in terms of sidetracks we could go down, which we'll have to, again, I'll say for future content, we will come back and
Right.
visit some of these in more detail. But so we talk about the outside pressure of people not understanding, the nature of how to parent a neurodivergent kid. And so a lot of times it's opposite. And so they're not understanding where you're coming from as a parent. But then if that happens within the parenting unit itself, like if one parent has a different way or a more traditional way and the other one wants to try this new approach, that if you're not on the same page, that can really create some chaos. And you also mentioned earlier about the siblings, right? And sometimes the fallout that goes along with the experience they're having, or all the attention that's going to one of the kids who are in need versus the others feeling left out. And, there's all kinds of complications that come along with that that can be worked through, but it does take some really intentionality as a parent and kind of understanding
It
what you're
does.
doing. So that idea of being on the same page as much as possible. I think all parents, even under ideal circumstances, are going to not be 100% on the same page, but being able to talk behind the scenes and figure out how to handle things and then try to present as unified a front as possible to the kids is the best way to go. But yeah, those things can get really exaggerated when you have a high needs child or, a teen or a young adult who's really struggling. Then that really brings out all of the challenges within the relationship as well. So it
The
really
tension
can
in our
take a
house
toll.
has definitely gone down. And the other thing I like about the training as opposed to a book is, I would read something and I'd be like, oh, where was that? Where am I going to find it? You know what I mean? Because I need a refresher. I can't remember, but I could just look by the title of what's, in your training and get right to where I want to. And there's something about, having somebody explain it to you via video that just really sets it much better for me and then enables me to kind of implement it again. And I won't lie. Sometimes I get snarky and I'm like, well, you need to look at Ed's video again, that says blah, 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 because you're off track. I try not
Yeah,
to do
that
that,
makes me
but
real popular. Yeah, please do that. That
once in a
makes me.
while it gets away from me and I just have to do it. But, truthfully,
Yeah,
he does it too. You
yeah,
know, it's good for
yeah,
both of us because it, it's not like either of us is telling the other one what to do. We're both in agreement that this is the right way to go. And we've just gotten off track and need a refresher.
yeah. And again, like I said, that when you're in the middle of the battle, so to speak, it's easy to forget what's going on or what the plan is, and what you had agreed to do and stuff like that. Yeah, it gets tough. You know what I mean? When the emotionality gets high, which is can happen a lot, then it's hard to stay calm and grounded and know what to do. But again, that back to the emotional regulation piece. That's a whole other topic that we're going to go into a lot because of how important I feel like it is to be very aware of your own emotional states and how you're coping with the stress as well, to make sure that you're in your best headspace and everything as much as possible, even when the situation is really getting hairy, so to speak. But
Well,
um,
and what it's also done is enabled us to meet our children where they are. And instead of being so focused on, well, I'm just going to bring up the driving example again, well, what if he never learns to drive and, oh, we've got to push it and all that kind of thing. You pull back and you say, is this really that important? Is it important that my child gets their license at 16 like everybody else? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But you start to think about what makes the most sense for your family and your child versus looking at what either you did growing up or what people around you are doing, because
yeah,
that's really what's most important, and that's for us what has built trust with our children. Right, they recognize when we parent that way that one, they don't feel like we're disapproving of them. Right, I mean, poor neurodiverse kids and adults, frankly, get a million messages all day long from society about how they're not good enough or they don't fit the mold or they're not right in some way, which is ridiculous because they have just as much to offer to the rest of the world as a neurotypical person does. But um, when we're willing to sit back and not push our agenda, but really spend some time listening to our kids about, you know, why they don't want to do something in a particular time frame or why they don't, it builds trust. And it builds a lot of times I'm like, oh, well, I wish I'd thought of that before because that totally makes sense why you're not ready to do that. But I was so focused on what I thought had to be done, I couldn't see it.
yeah. No, and I think that's one of the main challenges. Again, is societal expectations versus maybe a teen or a young adult on the in the neurodivergent category, so to speak, was just going to be probably most likely going to be on a more delayed path. You know what I mean? And I'd say a different path, right? I say even though the term delayed has a connotation to it that it's not right or correct, right? But I even think we could go into some more deeper philosophy about graduating high school, going to college, getting a job. I mean, this all stuff that our society has created that doesn't really mean anything other than we put meaning towards it. You know what I mean? And so, but I do think it's so important if you understand what's happening, back to the understanding neurodiversity, then it's so much easier to have, I don't know, maybe even patience isn't the right word, but to have an understanding of why this is just going to take a little longer, or maybe they aren't going to drive right at 16. And maybe that's the best thing because maybe they're not totally ready yet. Maybe their executive functioning and their ability to focus and stay in tune with what needs to happen when you're driving just isn't there yet. So you don't want to push that and then have them be in a situation where they're set up for failure essentially, and they're likely to have an accident or be stressed out or have other problems that come along with that. So yeah, being very aware of what your child's specific needs are and where they're at developmentally, and really a lot of times they'll let you know that not only not likely through talking to you about it, but
Right.
more through how their actions are or what they're acting out. And again, one of those big primary messages is pay attention to their behavior because they can't really tell you where they're struggling a lot of time. I mean, heck, I don't even sometimes know why I'm struggling with something until I really analyze it and think it through. But without that maturity and capability, then they're going to tell you where they're struggling by their behavior. I mean, where they're struggling, where they're acting out, or what things are just not happening at the right time frame or whatever. So really their behavior is communication. And so you definitely pay attention to what you're seeing and then try to adjust and adapt based on, what it is they're telling you through their behavior. So,
well, and one of the other things that, through doing this training and working with you and the parent group that's really helped us is, along with the trust that we've built in our relationship with our kids, we've also seen their self-confidence skyrocket because they now have a safe place to land. When you have all that tension in your house, they don't feel safe anywhere. They're getting negative
yeah,
messages
they're
at
going to get negative
school,
messages out in the world, right?
everywhere.
So it's
This
not going to
this
be, yeah,
has to be
exactly.
the place
Yeah.
where they can feel safe and accepted. And this training and really understanding how to parent neurodiverse adolescents and teens has really helped our kids build their self-confidence, and understand that it's okay that they're not doing things the same way that everybody else is. Matter of fact, in a lot of ways, it's actually quite good because
Yeah.
sadly, after COVID, a lot of neurotypical teens are going off to college and struggling. There was just so much there, which I totally understand. So, the one thing you want your children to be able to walk out into the world with is confidence, because that really confidence and resilience can really make a big difference on your happiness and how you can handle the challenges that life is going to send your way. And this has really helped us establish trust with our kids and build their confidence. They come to us when with things that I, to be honest, never thought that they would, somebody is at a party and doing something they shouldn't, they'll tell us, right? Come get us. Versus, getting a ride with somebody they shouldn't be riding with. They're not worried that we're going to say, well, why are you at a party where there's alcohol, or whatever the question is, right? Those kinds of things. And that's huge because it's
Yeah.
not just trust, it's safety too. But they know
Yeah,
we accept
absolutely.
them for who they are, and we're on their side, and we're safe.
Yep. Absolutely. No, I think, like I said, the world is it's going to be a harsh enough environment out there already, based on all the society stuff we're talking about. And so therefore, yeah, it's even more critical to have that connection inside the family. And like I said, a safe landing, a safe place to be, and be able to talk about some of the stuff that's having an idea of, really the confidence, I think, is important. But again, if you're trying to say, we used driving earlier as an example, but like the idea of pushing them to drive when they're not ready to, it just sets them up for one more failure, right? Like they're going to be trying hard, they're not going to be able to do it, they're going to be getting upset, and that's going to strain the relationship. And all those things just start to pile up. And again, you're just now one more force in their life that's telling them that they're not good enough, or they're not going to make it, or something along those lines. Where if just having some patience and letting the maturity kick in a little bit more, letting more time pass, and them getting more confident in other areas, then that can be a much smoother transition. So those are, some really important factors. But again, if you're not aware of this, you may just be like, hey, I got to get my kid to drive. You know what I mean? Like everyone in
Right.
the neighborhood's starting to wonder, when's he going to get his license? You know what I mean? Or when is she going to get a job, or whatever it might be, right? So then as a parent, you start feeling tempted or pressured to start pushing your kid in ways that just are not going to be to their long-term benefit at all.
Well, and
It's going to cause
that's where
harm.
the
So
the parent forum really helps, though, is because you're around other parents who understand the situation that you're in and accept you for it. And I'll be honest, it's made me a lot more confident in dealing with parents who, frankly, say things to me that they should not. And I'm not saying I'm not nice about it, but that just doesn't apply to my family. Thank you for your input, kind of thing.
yeah,
Because
thanks for your time.
you got to protect yourself, and you got to protect it, because it will wear on you over time.
Oh yeah.
And being part of a community that where everybody's kind of in the same boat and understands that our kids have as much to offer as all the other kids. They're going to offer it in a different way and maybe in a different time frame. So what?
Yeah. So I guess, like we were talking about, the safe place to land for your son or daughter in the home, with you as parents, the parent community hopefully is like that for parents, right? It's a safe place you can go and you can let your hair down and talk about what's really happening, in frank terms that won't shock everybody. You know what I mean? About the big meltdown that your son had the night before or whatever, and you're just devastated and wiped out and exhausted, and they go, "Oh yeah, yeah, we get it, we've been there." So, hopefully that's the kind of feel that that parents will have in that community. I mean, that's what we're going for sure. So, um, but yeah, so I'm trying to think. There's so many topics that we need to cover, and so I hope we'll be able to continue to explore some of these other things, like just more of the understanding of the nuts and bolts of neurodiversity and how it shows up, and then more importantly, like, okay, when you're noticing these things, what can I do as a parent to accommodate or help support rather than try to consequence or punish? I mean, I think that's one of the big shifts is when you see a struggle, that's the call for, okay, there's something here that they need, and there's something here that is really distressing them. Not that they're being rebellious or, I mean, the outward behavior may look like that, but they're letting you know that this is too much, or I'm overwhelmed, or I can't handle this. And so, what can we do as parents to provide those supports and understand what it is? And again, ideally working with your teen or young adult to understand, how things are going. And then, it's not just about excusing their behavior, like, oh, well, he's on the autism spectrum, so he can do whatever he wants. I mean, it's not that. It's more like, okay, we understand this about him or her. So how can we help them learn this about themselves, and then learn strategies to work around it, or be able to understand this about themselves, and either, frankly, avoid situations that are going to cause them
Well,
problems,
and
or
that's the
find
other big
strategies to get through
challenge.
it. Right? Yeah, the strategies to get through it, really. So.
Well, because once you master the mindset of, okay, when there's a meltdown or there's, behaviors that, aren't appealing happening, and you kind of get to the point where you're good at recognizing that they're just trying to communicate with you, and that, you kind of need to take that moment to figure out how you can support them and how you can handle that. But then once you master that part of it, it becomes, well, so when do I push? Right? Am I enabling,
Right.
or am I helping? Am I at this point where I'm just letting things go because I just don't want things to go back to the way that they were, and I'm just afraid? So that's a whole nother challenge,
Oh yeah.
which
Am
I'll
I
be
just walking
perfectly
on
honest.
eggshells? Yeah. Am I just trying to
I'm
not?
in the
Am I trying to
process
keep
of,
the peace? So.
and we have, because we've been working with you, things are pretty solid with our family, and they're pretty stable right now. But there are times where I ask myself, should I be pushing some of these things harder? Right?
Yeah,
You
that's a
don't want
question you
to.
ask me all the time. Your kids ask me all the
Pretty
time, like,
much all the time.
what's the balance here? I mean, again, and there is a balance, and sometimes, again, then this will be a whole other topic that we'll get into hopefully in the near future. But that accommodation versus enabling, right? Like, how much am I just trying to keep the peace versus, and not push or challenge my son or daughter to take the next step, or to have the next level of development, or how much am I holding appropriate boundaries, and doing the quote unquote correct thing here. So, and again, that's where it's so different than the typical neurotypical parenting. It's just a whole different way of doing this. So I hear so many times from parents, well, it just feels like I'm just letting them get away with this terrible disrespect, or I'm just letting them get away with murder. And and even the other siblings, or even your spouse or something like that, may say,
Right.
why are you doing
Absolutely.
this? Why are you letting him get away? And if you're at the grocery store, for sure, why are you, everyone's in their head thinking, why are you letting this kid treat you like this? You know what I mean? Or something along those lines. So again, it takes a whole bunch of understanding behind the scenes and in your own mind, so that you can be confident when you're taking a certain approach, that yeah, no one's going to understand this, but this is the right thing for my son or daughter in this moment. And I think that is so important. That's worth more in terms of your own confidence and your own your own understanding, and not let alone the benefit of your son or daughter in those situations. So and I
Well,
think
and in
that's
the
why this is
parent forum,
complicated. So
right. And, with you at time, you can kind of unpack what you did and say, did I handle this the right way? That is also, I call it doing a hot wash, right? You go back and you kind of look at what you did or didn't do, and how it worked out. And was it, so when you're faced with, because even though the situations are kind of the same thing over and over and over again, when you're close to it, it feels like it's different each time.
right.
And so being able to unpack things that worked and things that didn't work is extremely helpful. Certainly, I find too, with the how hard to push, how hard not to push.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are all, really, I guess, important topics that we can get back to. And it's so hard because Unlike, I think more so than any parenting, like you mentioned earlier, like you can read a parenting book and go, "Oh man, this is awesome! Yeah, this is going to work. I'm gonna go do this thing." And then as soon as you're in the trenches, so to speak, and your kid's doing, you're like, "What am I supposed to do, or how am I supposed to do this?"
Yes.
You know. So then that all just kind of goes away, right? So um, being able to be reminded, and then like I said, maybe kind of going through scenarios that happen and picking them apart a little bit and trying to figure out, okay, maybe if I'd adjusted this way a little bit, it might have helped. Those are the kind of things that I think are really important. But it's so, even more so than typical parenting, is it's so individualized to your particular son or your particular daughter, that it really needs to be a tailored approach. So even advice that I may kind of commonly give for working with neurodiverse teens or young adults, um, it's still maybe within that range. There's a whole different way of doing things for each different kid under different circumstances. So it is complicated. I mean, I wish it weren't. I mean, I guess hopefully I feel like I can help people with that, but there is some customization that needs to happen. So it's kind of like this process of, one, just really understanding neurodiversity, and then as you understand it, kind of adopting that approach to, okay, I really understand neurodiversity now a little bit better, and so I can maybe figure out how to approach my son or daughter a little bit differently. And then how do I adapt even that information? How do I adapt that specific information for my specific son or daughter or our family situation? So
Well,
it's
and
not
that's
only
why I
just,
like this program, because it's not just, you learn the training, you can go back and look at the training again if you need a refresher, but it also has that parent forum part, which is kind of interactive,
yeah,
right? So it doesn't just stagnate, because again, that was the problem. You read a book and, okay, what am I supposed to do? And you do it, but then it's like, well, it didn't work. Now what? Right?
yeah,
What do I
that's
do?
it. It didn't work,
It
so
didn't
forget
work.
it. I
Now
mean,
what?
yeah,
And a
forget it.
lot of times it's because the situation, you thought you were doing what it was telling you, but you actually weren't. Those kinds of things. And so you need support after the training to be able to, to continue to implement it on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, the live coaching meetings certainly are designed to, people can bring up a specific incident or something like that, and we can talk about it. And then you get the support not only from me directly in that moment, but also the rest of the parents that are listening and can offer some support to it as well. So I mean, I like that interactive part of it too, where you can get direct. We can address a very specific scenario one on one for that particular family, and the other parents who are at the meeting will be able to benefit from that as well, and kind of, again, they may need to filter it and adjust it a little bit for their son or daughter, but generally speaking, it'll give them ideas. And I think that's what it's all about, is options, right? I mean, you feel so
Mm-hmm.
limited and so back into a corner, and you feel like there's no options. But really, with the right kind of support and with people who understand what you're going through, and with some expert guidance, so to speak, then your options expand, and you realize, okay, I do have choices here, and there are things we can do to help this go better. So, I just hope parents can go from that feeling of like kind of hopelessness or helplessness or feeling out of control, or just out of options, to recognizing, wow, there's a lot of things we can do. And yeah, it may take some time, but things can adjust and can get better. And you
Well, and
know,
the live
um,
coaching is my favorite part, because for me as a parent, that's where I really struggle. Is just honestly looking at something, I understand it intellectually, but then somehow in the moment I get so overwhelmed or so hung up on what I think should be happening, or that I can't. And so having that live to say, well, this is how it went down. This is what I did. It did work this time, but I'm not sure about this, that, and the other. That live coaching part, to me, is invaluable, because I've never. We've tried a lot of different things, and that just really hasn't been available, because a lot of times therapists, just want to talk about the therapy piece of it. And that's not what this is. This is a completely different, giving you support as a parent so that you can parent your neurodiverse adolescent or teen in a way that benefits them and your relationship with them and your whole family, frankly.
yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think also just, um, not only, I am a therapist, so I do the therapy thing, but this is a coaching program, right? Like, so it is more about where the rubber hits the road, and how to actually do things to help it improve, and definitely not going into I mean, there's an education piece for sure that helps you understand philosophically what's happening, and also maybe mechanically or neurologically and all that kind of stuff. But we are definitely focused on solutions and trying to help things go better for the family and help improving the relationships and things along those lines. So definitely not therapy in that sense, but more practical coaching and education. And I think that's an important distinction. And probably, I still think that, at times doing individual counseling separate from doing a program like this is really, really, really important and helpful. And, there's obviously medication and psychiatrists and something that can really make a big difference. And then we can get into supplements and all the other kind of things that are out there. But yeah, so this is very focused on the rubber hits the road. How can we do things differently? How can we make it go better? Rather than the deeper issues behind the scenes. And again, that stuff is very important, but it's not what we're going to be doing here. But we can definitely have those conversations because, I am a licensed mental health professional and I am qualified to do that, but that's just not my role here. So, but yeah, so I do think that, even from the therapy point of view, a lot of professionals don't quite understand this either. It's not
I've gotten a lot of not good advice from very well-meaning, well-educated professionals.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's
Things that
taken years and years. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just am thinking about, when our child wasn't driving and we needed them to get somewhere, and they were like, well, just put them in an Uber. Yeah, that's not going to work. I don't know how to tell you that they're not going to do that, right? They're going to feel uncomfortable. They're really struggling with that social situation of awkwardness. That's not going to work. But
right. Yeah, for some kids that may be awesome, right? That may be a perfect solution, right? But yeah, for you guys, it was not the right. Again, it seems like it makes sense, right? Like, why not? Why wouldn't you do that? And again, those are the kind of things that it gets into the what's right for your particular son or daughter in those situations, and that's where you need someone to kind of help you, with some understanding of your situation and what's happening, to help you customize how to best parent for your particular family. So,
well, and you brought up the parent forum. This is just something a little bit off topic, but you were saying, supplements and all that kind of stuff. It's taken me a long time in talking to parents to find out, things that they've tried from a medication perspective or a supplement perspective that's really worked for their family. And it doesn't mean that it is or isn't going to work, but it's nice to know if somebody's done but is it the TMS therapy, the magnetic stuff?
Yeah, the trans.
Yeah. Has that worked? Did that work for your family? Did it not work for your family? We've gotten a lot of, good ideas from other parents about trying things, and some of them have been really helpful, and they've not been medication or therapy, but other things that have really worked well for us. So,
yeah, and again, it's such an interesting, side to this because medications can be very helpful, but they're not always helpful, right? Or one medication that's good for one child's not going to work at all for another, and may make things worse, and so you get all these situations, but what I hope is that there's this big bucket of experience out there that, at least you see the options and you see what's going to work. Maybe you try a few things that you wouldn't have tried before or that you wouldn't even have thought of. Anything from, probiotics to micronutrients to, like you said, the other therapies that may be helpful.
Magnesium was a big help for us.
Yeah,
we started it a long time ago, but it made a difference.
Right. Yeah. And so just all of that kind of knowledge base because I know that every parent out there, is trying their best to find all the right answers, right? And again, it's hard because you get the other thing we got to be careful of is that silver bullet thing. You're just looking for that one thing that's going to solve the whole problem, right? And it probably just does not exist yet. I mean, I don't know. Hold out hope for some silver bullet out there, but there are things that will help, right? And again, I like to look at it like a big pie, right? Like there's different slices of this pie. And everything can make a difference, and it's more of a the holistic approach, getting everything together as much as possible to give your son or daughter every opportunity that they can to be successful and learn to manage their emotions primarily, and be able to learn life skills that they need to be independent eventually and take care of themselves, so that you feel like that they're going to be able to do okay for themselves when you're gone, right? I mean, as a parent, you want to hopefully launch them into towards. yeah, some sort of independence where they are going to have a good life ahead of them. And like you were saying earlier too, neurodiversity comes with some amazing talents. I mean, I don't want to say like it's just it's hard because it is it's a different way of brain functioning, and so the way problems are looked at or perceived, and the way solutions are come about through their different neurological perspectives can really uh, be amazing contributions to society and everything along those lines. Of course, it does come with liabilities though too. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but at the same time, um, I think that one of the big tasks long term is trying to figure out how to support their talents and help them be able to navigate their own challenges, and help them be aware of what the challenges are and have strategies for navigating around them, which then allows their talents and their unique abilities to really shine. So
which is also another thing that I think the parent form, really helps with, because, if you have a adolescent who really likes dogs and wants to do stuff, volunteer stuff with dogs, or more than likely you're going to find a family that has a child who also does, and may have tried some different approaches, outside of volunteering, or um, looking at maybe getting them a job at a dog daycare or something like that, and how that worked out. It's nice to hear other parents' experiences, or how you can even I've talked to parents before who've done a really good job of just exposing their kids to lots of things in order to have them find what their passion is, and where their neurodiversity might serve them best.
absolutely, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think again that's that idea of this kind of collective knowledge and collective. Everyone's trying and trying different things, and some things are working, some things are not. But yeah, putting all those pieces together, and again, being able to draw from that knowledge base, I think is super important. So, well, I think we've covered a few things today, Amy. Thank you, I appreciate it. So, I think for our audience, when you come across this video, or if and when, feel free to let us know in the comments section. Like if you have questions or there's topics that you want us to address specifically, we're going to be really open to tackling what your needs are. So we're happy to hone in on specific areas. And again, the accommodation versus enabling is probably going to be a big one. Emotional regulation, and how to deal with meltdowns or shutdowns, all that kind of stuff is going to be big. How to manage technology. I mean, we could go on and on, right? So please let us know what you're interested in hearing from, and we will do our best to come up with topics of conversation to go through. And hopefully we can field some of your questions and be
And
responsive
if you
that
don't
way.
like us, just move along. You don't have to leave us something negative. Just move along.
Well, they say a thumbs down still helps the YouTube whatever algorithm.
Okay, fine. Just give us a thumbs down and then move along.
Yeah, but no, we definitely want to hear from you. So please respond, and feel free to reach out to me at www.neurodiversity-u.com, and join our parent training for sure. Like, reach out, become a part of our community. It'll make a lot of difference for you and for your children and your family and your
It has for
parenting
us.
relationships. I mean, yeah, it can make a lot of difference in a lot of areas. This is really, really difficult in a lot of ways. But there are definitely some unique opportunities presented there too, and I just really don't want you to go through that whole process and struggle alone, because there are a lot of resources and things that can be very helpful, and a lot of strategies and techniques and things like that that can make a big difference. So please reach out, and we hope to see you soon and hear from you in the comments section. But Amy, thank you so much for joining me on
Thanks,
this.
Dr.
Really
Callahan.
appreciate your time. Yep, and we will try to do these on a regular basis. Can't commit yet, but we'll let you know. All right, thanks. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.